Limitless, I want to be honest with you. I've been in youth work for about 15 years. I've heard hundreds of talks like Mark's just done. I've been in hundreds of conferences where people have responded like you have. I've been in my own church, being a youth pastor for nearly 7 years now. And loads of the young people that I've had the privilege to lead and pastor have made responses where they have said, I am going to stand up and stand out for Jesus. And the thing that breaks my heart, Limitless, is that so many of them aren't following Jesus still. So many of them have made commitments to say, I am going to live life for God. I am going to live among a people of unclean lips, and they've not been able to keep their own lips clean. They've fallen away from God. They've dropped the promises that they gave to God. And it breaks my heart, and I really believe that God still has a purpose and a plan for their life. But I'm desperate for them to keep following Jesus. I'm desperate for my own young people who've been here at the gathering this weekend and still are, that they will commit to these things, to stand up and live out for Jesus. I'm desperate to see that. And we don't just want to inspire you and get you to stand up and shout out some declarations towards God. This morning, I want to equip you to live among a people of unclean lips. In Ephesians 4, Paul writes to the people in Ephesus. Ephesus was like Babylon. It was a dodgy place. It was a place where people lived with unclean lips. If you imagine a Game of Thrones episode set in Magaluf, you have got the city of Ephesus. That was what it was like. It was proper naughty. And Paul spends 3 chapters in Ephesus telling the people that they are called, that they are holy, that they are set apart, that they are a child of God. He spends 3 chapters telling the people who live among these people in this setting of a Game of Thrones episode in Magaluf, they're living amongst that. Some of them are still living like that, and he calls this stuff out of them. And then right at the beginning of chapter 4 of Ephesians, Paul says this to them. He says, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Guys, I want to urge you to live a life worthy of the calling that you have received. When you go from the gathering, live a life that is worthy of the calling that you have received this weekend. I want to look at a story in the Old Testament. It's a story of David, and it's not a story that is going to serve as inspiration to us. It's going to serve as warning. King David was an incredible bloke, and he was known as a man who was fully devoted to God. It says hundreds of years after he existed that even though he had highs and lows, successes and failures, he was a man who was after God's own heart. He was a man of integrity. He was an incredible, courageous leader, but he messed up big time. And we are going to look together in 2 Samuel chapter 11, David's lowest point, the moment that he messed up big time. And we're going to learn some things. It says in 2 Samuel 11, verse 1, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman washing. The woman was very beautiful. Arrr. And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, I am pregnant. Dun, 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 dun. What on earth has David done here? He is a man of integrity, a man who is after God's own heart, a man who said, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to live out for God. And yet here, he absolutely gets it wrong. And I think in just this short passage, there are 4 things that David does that we can learn from, that if we are going to live a life worthy of the calling that we have received, we need to put into action. If we are going to live among a people of unclean lips and be part of the uprising, we need to learn from what David does here. The first thing that David does is he disengages with the mission. It says in verse 1, in the springtime, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men. But David remained in Jerusalem. We don't know why he stayed in Jerusalem. We don't know why he didn't go out to war, but he was supposed to, but he didn't. Maybe he thought, I'm fed up of real life battles. I just want to kick back at home and play fake battles and play Fortnite. Maybe he was in the middle of a Netflix series and thought, I want to finish this before the summer. Maybe he just couldn't be bothered. Maybe he was complacent and thought, you know what, Joab's got it sorted. I can kick back, I can chill, I can relax. We don't know why, but we know that this was the start of him falling into temptation. You see, when he disengaged with what God wanted him to do, when he wasn't in the place where God had called him to be, where God had ordained him to be, he fell into temptation. Guys, when we disengage with the mission of God, we are much more likely to fall into temptation. When we go into our schools, when we go to parties, when we hang out with our mates, when we're playing online, if we are not engaged with what God wants us to do in those spaces, we are far more likely to fall into temptation. Guys, when you go back to school, when you're at the house parties that you're invited to, when you're hanging out with your mates, when you're playing online, when you are wherever you are, remember you are part of the uprising. Be engaged with the mission. David didn't, and it was the start of his downfall. The second thing is that David didn't recognize his vulnerability. It says, one evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. He was clearly up in the middle of the night. He didn't have enough sleep. And I always say, I'm more likely to fall into temptation. I'm more likely to be vulnerable when I am halt. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Those are the 4 times that I am more likely to fall into temptation. Guys, David didn't recognize that in this moment, he was tired. He was more likely to be vulnerable. He was more likely to fall into temptation. He didn't recognize his own vulnerabilities. We have got to recognize our vulnerabilities, guys. We've got to be wise. You know, maybe you are the kind of person that can go to a house party and not drink a drop of alcohol and be there and represent Jesus. You should definitely go to house parties. Maybe you're like me when I was a teenager. And you go to house parties, and you end up having 1 drink and 2 drink, and you end up drinking too much and embarrassing yourself. You should definitely not go to house parties. Guys, if we are going to live among a people of unclean lips, we've got to recognize where we are vulnerable. We've got to recognize our own weaknesses and where we are more likely to fall into temptation. The third thing that David does is he gives in to curiosity. It says, from the roof, he saw a woman washing. The woman was very beautiful. At this point, he hasn't done anything wrong. He's mooching around on the roof of his house, on the roof of his palace, and he's looking and he's going, oh, look, there's a girl there having a bath. She's pretty fit. I mean, that's never happened to me. I've never been on the roof of my house and that's happened. But at that point, David's done nothing wrong. He's looked and he's gone, look, there's a woman having a bath over there. She's pretty hot. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when he goes, she's pretty hot, I'm just going to have a little look. And he gets his binoculars out and he has a little perv at her. Like, that's the point that he gets it wrong. That's the point where he messes up. You see, it's not that he notices her, it's that he gives in to his curiosity. It's that he goes back for a second look. And there will be times where things tempt you of the world, where you're drawn into stuff. And guys, we need to not give in to our curiosity. We need to not go for a second look. What David should have gone is he should have gone, there's a woman over there having a bath. She's pretty fit. I'm going to get down and go down to my bedroom and go back to sleep. He should have ran as far away from that situation as he could, but he didn't. He gave in to curiosity. Guys, let's not give in to our curiosity. Let's run when we recognize the signs of temptation. The final thing is that David ignored the warning signs. When it comes to giving into sin, when it comes to giving into temptation, God will always give us warning signs. He'll always give us a moment where he goes, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure this is how you want to live your life? God won't stop us. He won't drag us back. But he'll give us a little opportunity to go, yeah, you're right, I don't want to do that. And David here has that opportunity because he sends the messengers to go and find out about this hot woman having a bath on a roof. And it says she is Bathsheba, maybe because she was in a bath. Let that one settle. And it says, she was the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. You see, David had a group of fellas who were his most trusted warriors, the people he was probably closest to, the people he'd stood in battle with time after time after time again. These were his bros, his squad, his mates. They were known as David's mighty men. Eliam, one of David's mighty men. Uriah the Hittite, one of David's mighty men. This is not just a story of David sleeping with someone else's wife. This is a story of betrayal. See, David should have seen that moment and gone, whoa, these are my mates. I shouldn't be doing this. He should have recognized the warning sign, but he didn't. Guys, have people in your life that give you warning signs. Have people around you that are going to help you recognize the warning signs. People in your life that are going to go, mate, I thought you were living for Jesus. Come on, let's get this right. Guys, let's recognize the warning signs. Recognize the moments where God's going, are you sure you want to live like this? Are you sure this is how you should be living? Guys, let's be wise enough to recognize those signs. Guys, if we are going to live among a people of unclean lips, if we are going to live a life worthy of the calling that God has given us, then we need to learn from this stuff. We need to learn from David. We need to step up. We need to be wise. We need to respond and live out what God is calling us to do. We've got to commit to pursue purity. And we're going to spend just a little bit of time now just responding to what God might want to do. So I wonder if you could stand to your feet.